this title, by the way. So you're welcome. Of course, my mentor, shout out Dr. Nelson Pichardo, retired, Dr. Pam, of course, Navarre, and then Gilly, of course, who's always giving me tips. So basically, everyone asks me, how did you get to where you started? Well, back in the day, feel free to come through. Back in the day, when I was working with Dr. Pichardo, we're both history nerds. We really geeked out about these two gentlemen. They were the first black boxing champions, and they lived similar lifestyles. In particular, the difference was he was accepted by white media, he was not. And so when he retired, I had to focus on this part because Dr. Pichardo was working on this. He was researching this gentleman and living their lives. And so I was really focused on this. And so essentially, all that to say, what is appropriate blackness? We both came up with the term. It's essentially the presupposition that blackness is curated by the identity of whiteness and white supremacist society. So that's essentially what it is. And how does that look for social classes, race, etc., etc., without hitting you with some crazy vocabulary? In the background, well, all this to say, I read a million books. I read some microfilm as well. And essentially, I'm looking at the black community's understanding of this fine gentleman right here, Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. And if you can think of like a modern alternative or a modern example, he would be like Floyd Mayweather. He would be like a rapper. He's the first successful black celebrity of that time period, all the way in the 1900s. And these two gentlemen were thought leaders of the black middle class, and they owned a whole bunch of newspapers and stuff. And so I read a lot of their newspapers to understand what do black people think about this gentleman and what his position is for that time period. So I just read a lot of books. You're welcome. And so before I can tell you what I found, I have to talk about some vocab. Because I was very hungry when I made this. Essentially, things like critical race theory, understanding that, race is real the way that we construct it, social construct. Our sociologists will know that that's just what it is. And then symbolic interactionism, everything has like an implied meaning. Performativity, how does your gender affect the way people treat you? Marxism, because it's about social class. If you're a boxer, you're broke as hell. Feminism, of course, you cannot understand gender without feminist theory being the foundation. And of course, intersectionality, Lacanian psychoanalysis, all get put together, all these different damn ingredients to make this new framework, which I sort of mentioned, appropriate blackness. Again, of course it's going to depend on your gender, right, how you present yourself, but how does a black person in a white supremacist society, how do they try to fit in, quote unquote, especially in this time period that Jack Johnson came from? His parents were slaves, and he's the first free man in his family. And so we have what me and my mentor proposed, appropriate blackness. What does it mean to be black, and what does it mean to, unfortunately for Jack Johnson, be inappropriately black, because he was punished. And so, again, sort of a little discourse, I like a little memes here and there. Essentially, these two gentlemen, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, they had different opinions on how black men should conduct themselves in the face of white supremacist society. Booker T. Washington was like, oh, we just work hard, and then eventually, we'll get some assimilation and respect. And then Du Bois was saying, no, we need to document how many lynchings are going across the United States, as he did with his Crisis magazine, and we need to be confrontational about this. We won't just get our right through money. That's the antithesis of it. His position eventually changed to being anti-capitalist. And so, yeah, some memes right here. Well, we'll get into it. And essentially what I found out, this is what I found out. Jack Johnson, as you can see, the man's so pretty. He dresses really well. I tried my best. I'm a college student. I didn't have the grills, but it's in black and white. But there's pictures of him smiling. He had grills way before rappers existed. And so Jack Johnson is this famous guy who perpetuated this gender strategy. The sporting man, someone who's not worried about, oh, I'll pay the bills, because he's a boxer, right? And he also didn't have a white manager, so he had control of his public image and what he can and can't do. He's like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like the KKK would threaten this man, and they say, oh, if you knock the white man out, Negro will kill you. And he was like, oh, I don't care. I'm gonna knock him out cold. And so he did that in 14 rounds. And he a lot of the construction of manliness at that time, gender again, was to be rich, affluent, to be financially stable, to get money whenever, not to worry about this, that, and the other. But when Jack Johnson does it, oh, it's a problem. Oh, I don't know, boxing is a hard sport. So a lot of the white supremacist power structures created new versions of like racism as we understand it. The black root comes because of Jack Johnson. He knocks out the white man so good, he just, the black people are, they're beasts. And so as time goes on, essentially, Jack Johnson, of course, we're not black capitalists here, we're not pro that. Jack Johnson eventually loses the title, gets knocked out in Havana. And so this new version of blackness, appropriate blackness, this young man right here, Joe Louis, is the second heavyweight champion 20 years later because of all the things that Jack Johnson did. Married a white woman, had a Mercedes-Benz when everyone had no cars and everything. Most people understood that the way that Jack Johnson conducted himself was the bad way to do it. And so as time goes on, the Great Depression goes on, people understand that being quiet and not being controversial was the way to assimilate into American culture, like this gentleman right here. And these are different versions of appropriate blackness. Of course, we have Serena Williams, always judged about her gender, her body. Very weird, okay? People need to grow up. And of course, we got Tupac, very controversial, but he also is a sporting man in the sense that, oh, I'm not worried about that. Racism, oh, that's all good, but I just make money. And then, of course, we have Colin Kaepernick, known for his political stances, but was punished in the sense that he can't even get a job anymore, even though he put all his stats into football. So the military helped Joe Louis become this American hero figure, breaking the color barrier. Other folks, Michael Jordan, the most capitalist dude you can think of, and then Muhammad Ali, of course, he loved Jack Johnson. He's like, oh, if you think I'm crazy, Jack Johnson, that nigga was crazy. He had a pretty suit, pretty woman, pretty white woman, he was crazy. His inspiration. All that to say that this is the simplified version. The gender strategy of Jack Johnson, the sporting man, still exists today, and it's a way to assert agency within white-dominated society. The identities, I also found out, the identities of black and white are relational, meaning you can't get black without white, because we can describe, I could read you a million books, oh, this is how black people describe themselves, blah, blah, blah. However, you ask 10 white people, what does it mean to be white, you get 11 answers, right? Or maybe you won't get answers. Well, I'm just Jared, what do you mean? You know, that's the response that I keep getting. And I didn't get too nerdy about it, but boxing, as we understand it, is, in terms of like racial stacking, sports sociology, it's coded black because you're fighting, you're shirtless, it's brutal, and even the way that Jack Johnson, the way he fought, changed some of the rules of boxing because he was literally stronger than most of his opponents. He could literally little brother you the whole time and just wait for you, and he would talk shit and be like, what? What's he gonna do? Like, boxing changed because of this man. And so, of course, your class perspective will change. Like, sporting man's strategy is for working class black men, right? Rich, middle class black men have different understandings. Like Michael Jordan, he don't care about race, he's just trying to sell his shoes, right? That's what Muhammad Ali said, by the way. Sporting man still exists, and the acceptance of blackness as we understand it is still not embraced because we still see racial problems even today. Oh, why do some black quarterbacks, he's ugly, he's a braggart, da da da. But then a white quarterback, the same similar statistic, he's intelligent, he's a playmaker, he's that guy. That is just one sports example for you. And of course, there's my references, not all of them, they're too long, I read too many books. And then of course, I want to say, without Dr. Pam LeVar, I would not be here, as with other McNair scholars. I wouldn't be here without her contributing and just being the advocate that she was. So RIP Dr. Pam. And that's basically it. So ask me all the questions. You're welcome. Yeah.
What,
Yes.
in your research, did you come up with like a working definition of what appropriate blackness is?
Yeah, essentially, how do black people, under the context of white supremacist society, conduct themselves? That's the basics, without too much vocabulary. Does that make sense?
And so is that, I mean, that sounds kind of vague, right? Are there any specifics to that, or is there any...
Depending on your social class, that will change how you conduct your behavior.
So could you identify like maybe 3 things that Jack Johnson acted outside of that appropriate blackness?
He married a white woman, multiple white women, when the time when black men were lynched for looking at white women, or even being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jack Johnson also, he was a braggart. He loved to talk. We can't hear the footage, but he's literally playing with his opponents. If you watch any of his footage, he's known to just literally put his hand out, wah, wah, and just because back then, if you knock out your white opponent as a black person, you're gonna get lynched, okay? So you need to prolong the fight. So Jack Johnson creates this new boxing style that's really defense-oriented, so he prolongs the fight at the expense of his white opponent. So he took joy in making his opponents suffer. And not only that, he also patted his crotch a little bit to be like, I'm that guy, you know? That was Jack Johnson. That's another way that he was inappropriately black. As well as he spoke about racial issues in the sense of well, a lot of people give me flack because this, that, and the other, but other white heavyweight champions conduct themselves in similar ways, but they don't get the same media response. So he was vocal, he made fun of the white power structure, and he was the quote-unquote individual in the sense that he went through a lot of pain in terms of his life, and people he's the celebrity, so he had a white wife, multiple of them, and was irreverent about what is expected of a black man of that status, because his parents are slaves. So I kind of know a little bit about it. Yes.
So this isn't my area of study at all.
Yes.
So I might sound very dumb. So I'm going to try and ask the question because I've seen this 5 times and I love it each time.
Yep.
So when you were talking about kind of the archetype of the accommodationist versus the confrontationalist throughout history, you know, we have archetypes like W. Du Bois and Jack Johnson and then Muhammad Ali. Do you think that how do you envision that push and pull between those 2 ideologies? Do you think that confrontationalism needs to be the future in order to actually make any changes, or do you think Booker T. Washington's idea of being an accommodationalist, is that having elements of that is helpful? I for one, I think we should be confrontational the whole way through. But
sure.
Did you see what was your experience? I guess in what I was confused.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think I agree with you. It's a constant battle. For example, Brittany Griner, she's a WNBA basketball player, but she's always been oh, she's a man because she's so strong and tall. You know, all these other rising black women, which is a different thing. But essentially, I feel like it's a cyclical battle that, at least for Jack Johnson, I will say there is a way. It's not as revolutionary, quote unquote, to confront the power structure because it's really built on capitalist success. However, I think the gender strategy of Jack Johnson, because he's the popularizer of that gender strategy, I think it's useful in the sense that it doesn't matter what you do, you will be politicized. Your body will be otherized by the government, et cetera, white power structures. So in my mind, to answer your question, it's a little bit of both. But again, it doesn't matter what you do, you're otherized to begin with. You're not Jack Johnson, you're Jack Johnson, the black heavyweight champion, not Jack Johnson, the heavyweight champion. You're gonna always be otherized, no matter how you do it. I agree, we should be a little bit more confrontational. It just depends on what avenues communities need to take a hold of. And one of the avenues they found was sporting success through sports. He paid for other people's funerals, some boxers who couldn't afford it, and he advocated in black churches and helped vote. He was actually the first, Jack Johnson, he was popular for saying, oh, I knocked out Jim Jeffries, which is the white heavyweight champion. I knocked him out because he was a Republican. Jack Johnson helped the black community become Democratic. Yeah, in the 30s. So, very funny guy. But that was Jack Johnson. He loves to talk shit, and so do I. So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's about the,
Hello there. This is the post-credit scene that Marvel has made famous, and this is my own attempt at it. If you've watched this far, I want to say thank you very much, and I love you. I also wanted to highlight how I say the word essentially in the phrase, all that to say a little too much. I apologize. I'm going to get better. But what this is for is a better way to communicate appropriate blackness that I failed to do within the video itself, just by talking about a more contemporary example of how one's gender expression and their race is hyperfixated upon by the media. I have this article from Vox talking about the many instances of Serena Williams' race and body, because she her gender expression is female, are basically attacked and lampooned. For example, in 2002, this is from the article, in 2002, after Williams competed at the US Open wearing a black spandex catsuit, Sunday Telegraph columnist Otis Gibson seemingly struggled to find appropriate language in his critique of her outfit. Otis writes, "On some women," referring to the catsuit, "might look good. Unfortunately, some women aren't wearing it. On Serena, it only serves to accentuate a superstructure that is already bordering on the digitally enhanced and a rear end that I will attempt to sum up as discreetly as possible by simply referring to it as, quote, formidable." Bro. Here's another one for you. Another Telegraph reporter wrote, talking about Williams' breasts, "Generally, I'm all for chunky sports stars. But tennis requires a mobility Serena cannot hope to achieve while lugging around breasts that are registered to vote in a different U.S. state from the rest of her." Bro. My God. Way too masturbatory, I swear to God. Oh, another Telegraph reporter. Maybe the Telegraph has a bias. But Sue Mott seemed to embrace Tarpashev's and others' characterization of Williams as scary and take it another dehumanizing level when she wrote in 2002 that Williams and Venus had, quote, evolved into players of Amazonian physique and piranha mentality. What a strange... Don't you think it's strange that her sister, Venus, and Serena are talked about in such dehumanizing language? Don't you think that's strange? I'll link it in the bio, by the way, this article, showing all the examples. Another article talking about the weird comments about Serena Williams comes from a columnist with Inside Tennis magazine, where he issued an apology to Serena when he asked Serena if she was intimidated by her rival Maria Sharapova's supermodel good looks. Bro, what are you trying to say? Even the implication of, quote unquote, being intimidated by Maria Sharapova's supermodel good looks, the implication is that Serena Williams is ugly and not supermodel-like. But not belaboring the point, appropriate blackness is how black people conduct themselves in a white supremacist society and accounting for the labor market that white supremacist society creates according to one's gender. So for Jack Johnson, as a man, a black man, he was able to use boxing as a vehicle to success.
talking about Serena Williams, tennis is a gendered institution in that it is primarily marketed towards women because it's seen as less tough, less gritty in terms of culturally understood. So depending on your gender, appropriate blackness will look different, especially with context to time periods and media depictions. So that's essentially what it is. I said essentially again. My apologies. Anyway, hopefully you learned something and hopefully you were entertained. That's what's important. Anyway, peace.